The city stretched beneath him like a circuit board of broken promises. 10 million lights glowing cold through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the penthouse boardroom. James Daniel Sullivan stood alone at the glass, a silhouette against the San Francisco skyline, and felt nothing at all. Behind him, the conference table gleamed under recessed lighting. The contract sat there, $50 million in venture capital, signed and sealed and utterly meaningless. His reflection stared back at him from the window, a man of 43 who had built an empire from nothing but brilliant ideas and brutal ambition. Biogenesis Medical Technologies. The name meant life, rebirth, second chances. But what did any of it mean when you went home to an empty apartment every single night? His phone buzzed. James glanced down, saw the notification, and felt something crack open in his chest. Catherine Sullivan's wedding announcement. Not Sullivan anymore, of course. She had taken back her maiden name the day their divorce finalized 8 months ago. Catherine Brennan now. Catherine Brennan remarried to a cardiologist from Pacific Heights, already pregnant with their first child. James set the phone face down on the polished mahogany. He had wanted children. Catherine had wanted corner offices and partnership tracks and a life unencumbered by the messy chaos of parenthood. In the end, she had chosen her career over their marriage, and he had chosen work over everything else. And here they were. She was building a family. He was standing in an empty room at 11 o'clock at night, staring at his own ghost in the glass. The memory hit him without warning. His father's voice, rough with the accent that never quite faded even after 40 years in America. Help when you can, son. That's what makes a man worth anything. His father, Michael Sullivan, who had worked the docks in Boston until his heart gave out when James was 15, who had done Onan in their cramped apartment while James sat in a high school gymnasium taking the SATs, chasing a future that felt very much like a hollow shell right now. 28 years later, James had everything his father never did. Money, status, power, respect, and he was completely, utterly alone. He gathered his coat from the chair, a $3,000 cashmere blend that felt like nothing against his skin, and left the office. The lobby was empty. Security had cycled through hours ago. The elevator descended in silence, just James and his reflection in the stainless steel doors. And when they opened onto the parking garage, the fluorescent lights flickered and buzzed like dying insects. His footsteps echoed in the vast concrete space. Italian leather shoes on cold cement. The sound of wealth, of success, of emptiness. He rounded the corner toward his Tesla, already rehearsing another hollow evening. Then he heard it, a child crying. James stopped. The sound came again. A soft, broken whimper that cut through everything else. He scanned the rows of parked cars, his pulse quickening despite himself. The garage was supposed to be secure, keycard access only. But there, near a concrete support pillar, maybe 30 yards away, something moved in the shadows. Something small. James approached slowly, every sense suddenly awake in a way he had not felt in years. As he got closer, the shapes resolved into clarity. 2 children, 2 little girls, huddled together against the cold cement wall like abandoned kittens. The older one, maybe 7 years old, sat upright with her back pressed against the concrete, arms wrapped tight around a smaller figure. The younger child, no more than 4, trembled violently despite being wrapped in her sister's embrace. Their clothes were too thin for December in San Francisco. The older girl wore a stained hoodie and jeans that hung loose on her small frame. The younger one clutched a stuffed rabbit, its fur matted and gray, and shivered with a cold that went deeper than weather. James stopped a safe distance away and crouched down, making himself smaller, less threatening. "Hey there," he said quietly. His voice sounded strange in the echoing garage, too loud and too soft all at once. "Are you hurt? Do you need help?" The older girl's eyes snapped to his face, blue eyes sharp with intelligence and fear. She pulled her sister closer, protective instinct radiating from every line of her small body. "Stay back," she said. Her voice carried a weight no 7-year-old should ever have to bear. "We're fine." James could see they were anything but fine. The younger girl's lips had a bluish tint. Her breathing came in shallow gasps. The older girl's hands trembled where they gripped her sister's shoulders. "You don't look fine," James said gently. "When did you last eat?" The younger girl whimpered something too quiet to hear, and the older one's jaw tightened. "That's none of your business." But even as she said it, James saw the calculation happening behind those ancient eyes. She was weighing options, measuring risks, trying to decide if this stranger represented salvation or danger. James stayed very still. "My name is James. I work here. This is my office building." He gestured vaguely toward the elevators. I'm not going to hurt you, but I think maybe you both need some help. The older girl studied him for a long moment. Then she looked down at her sister, at the way the little one shook with cold and exhaustion, and something in her expression broke. Can you, she started, then stopped. Swallowed hard. Tried again. Can you take her instead of me? The words hit James like a physical blow. His breath caught in his throat. In 43 years of living through business deals and betrayals and the slow dissolution of his marriage, he had heard a lot of devastating things. But nothing had ever gutted him quite like those 6 words from a 7-year-old child. What? The word came out strangled. What do you mean? The girl's chin trembled. She was fighting tears, fighting to stay strong, fighting to be the protector when she should have been protected. Please, she whispered. Lily's the good one. She never gets in trouble. She's sweet and quiet and perfect. Her grip on the younger girl tightened until her knuckles showed white. I'll go back to him. I will. Just please don't let him find her. James felt something shift inside his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to call security, push this heartbreak away. But he looked at the older girl, at the way she held her sister with fierce devotion, and he knew he could not walk away. But he looked at the older girl, at the way she held her sister with a fierce devotion that shamed him, and he knew he could not walk away. No one is going back anywhere tonight, James said, his voice rough with emotion he could not quite name. Not you, not Lily. Both of you are coming with me. The older girl blinked. Disbelief and hope warred in her expression. You don't have to, she said. Yes, James told her. I do. He stood slowly, shrugged off his cashmere coat, and wrapped it around both of their shoulders. The fabric probably cost more than everything these children owned combined, but it was just cloth, just warmth. He crouched again and held out his hands. Can I carry Lily? She looks cold. The older girl hesitated, then nodded. James scooped the younger child into his arms, and she was so light it terrified him. Like holding a bird, all hollow bones and fragile breath. She buried her face against his shoulder, clutching that ratty stuffed rabbit, and James felt his throat close up. He offered his other hand to the older girl. She stared at it for a heartbeat, then 2, then slowly reached out and let him help her to her feet. They walked to the elevator in silence. James carried Lily, her small body radiating a cold that went bone deep. The older girl walked beside him, one hand gripping his sleeve like a lifeline. In the polished steel of the elevator doors, James caught their reflection. A man in an expensive suit, his arm around a shivering child. A 7-year-old girl with ancient eyes, holding tight to a stranger's hand because she had no other choice. As the elevator rose, the older girl spoke again. You're James Sullivan. It was not a question. I saw you on TV, the charity thing for the children's hospital. James glanced down at her. She was looking at the Biogenesis logo on his security badge. You're rich, she said flatly, then quieter, almost afraid to hope. Can you help our mom too? Where is your mom? James asked. I don't know. The girl's voice wavered. She got hurt. A car hit her 3 days ago. We ran because he came. Who came? But the elevator doors opened onto the penthouse level, and the question hung unanswered in the air. James's apartment sprawled across the top floor, all marble and glass and designer furniture that suddenly looked obscene in its luxury. The girl stood in the entrance, overwhelmed by the space. Lily pressed closer to her sister, eyes wide. It's okay, James said. He set Lily down gently on the leather couch, then turned the thermostat up to 78 degrees. You're safe here. Let me get you some food. He opened the refrigerator and stared at its contents. Protein bars, Greek yogurt, sparkling water. Nothing remotely suitable for children. He grabbed what he could find, arranged it on a plate, then called the concierge service. I need children's clothes delivered immediately, he said. 2 girls, ages approximately 4 and 7. Warm clothing, pajamas, toiletries. I don't care what it costs. I need it within the hour. When he returned to the living room, he found the older girl still standing, watching him with careful suspicion. Lily had curled into a ball on the couch, the stuffed rabbit clutched to her chest. James set the plate down on the coffee table. It's not much, he admitted, but it's something. The older girl did not move toward the food. Instead, she asked, Why are you helping us? It was a good question, a fair question. James thought about how to answer it and realized he did not have words for what he felt. Just instinct, just need. I don't know, he said honestly, but I can't walk away. The girl studied his face for another long moment, then seemed to make a decision. She moved to the couch, took a protein bar, and broke it in half. She gave one piece to Lily and kept the other for herself. They ate in silence. James watched them, these two small survivors, and felt something shift in his understanding of the world. Money could buy a lot of things, but it could not buy whatever it was that made this 7-year-old willing to sacrifice herself for her sister. When they had finished eating, James grabbed blankets from the linen closet and made a nest on the couch. He turned up the heat even higher. Lily's lips were still too pale, her breathing still too shallow. "You can sleep here tonight," he said. "Tomorrow we'll figure out what to do next." But the older girl was not ready to sleep yet. She stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, and when she spoke again, her voice was very small. "My name is Grace," she said. "This is my sister, Lily." "Grace," James nodded. "All right, can you tell me about your mom?" Grace's shoulders tensed. "Her name is Rebecca Morgan. She's a nurse at St. Francis. Uncle Vince got her fired. He's not really our uncle. He's Mom's ex-boyfriend. He hurt her. And when Mom owed him money, he said he'd take Lily." James felt rage building. "Take her where?" "He knows people who pay for little girls." The world tilted. "When did the car hit your mom?" 3 nights ago. There was blood. So much blood. Vince had been threatening all day, so we ran. We've been hiding in doorways, under bridges." She looked down at her sister curled up on the couch with the blanket pulled to her chin. "But Lily's getting sicker. She's cold all the time. And I thought maybe if I could find someone to help her, even if I had to go back." Her voice broke completely then, and James crossed the room before he could think about it. He knelt in front of Grace, meeting her eyes. "You're not going back anywhere," he said firmly. "Neither of you. I'm going to find your mom, and I'm going to make sure Vince never touches either of you again. Do you understand?" Grace stared at him, then slowly she nodded. "Okay," she whispered. James stood and pulled out his phone. 3 in the morning, he scrolled through his contacts until he found the name he needed, Sarah Mitchell. They had gone to Stanford together, stayed friends through the years, even as their paths diverged. She had become a detective with the San Francisco Police Department. He had become a tech billionaire. But when his company had dealt with a security breach 2 years ago, Sarah had been the one he called. He stepped into his bedroom and dialed. She answered on the 4th ring, voice thick with sleep. "James, do you have any idea what time it is?" "Sarah, I need your help." He kept his voice low, not wanting to wake the girls. "I found 2 children in my parking garage tonight. They're sisters, 7 and 4. Their mother was hit by a car 3 days ago. They've been on the streets." There was a pause, then Sarah's voice came back, sharp and awake. "James, please tell me you called the police." "I'm calling you." "That's not the same thing. Where are these children now?" "In my apartment. Sarah, they were freezing, starving. One of them offered to let herself be taken so her sister could be safe. I couldn't just leave them." Another pause, longer this time. He could almost hear Sarah thinking, weighing protocols and procedures against the reality of 2 children in danger. "James, this is serious. You could be charged with kidnapping." "They were in danger. I provided shelter." "That's not kidnapping. Legally, it's complicated. You need to involve Child Protective Services." The older girl says a man named Vince threatened to sell the younger one. "Sell her, Sarah, to traffickers." He heard Sarah exhale sharply. "Give me 2 hours. I'll check recent hospital admissions for a woman matching the description." "And James?" "Yeah? Don't do anything else until I call you back. Understood?" "Understood." He ended the call and returned to the living room. Lily had fallen asleep, her breathing a little easier in the warmth. Grace sat on the floor beside the couch, one hand resting on her sister's shoulder. "Was that the police?" she asked quietly. "A friend who's a police detective," James said. "She's going to help us find your mom." Grace nodded but did not look reassured. James sat down in the armchair across from her. "Grace, can you tell me more about your mom? What hospital did she work at?" "St. Francis. She was a night nurse. She loved it. She said helping people was the most important thing you could do." Grace's eyes filled with tears. But then Vince started coming to her work, bothering her, saying things to the other nurses. They fired her because of him. And the money she owed him? Lily got really sick last year. Pneumonia. We had to go to the emergency room and it cost a lot. Mom didn't have insurance. Vince said he would loan her the money. But then he said she owed him $30,000 with interest, and if she didn't pay, she trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. James felt sick. "Did your mom go to the police?" "She tried, but Vince has friends. He said if she reported him, his friends would make sure we disappeared." All of us. Grace wiped her eyes. Mom was so scared. She tried to get extra shifts, tried to make enough to pay him back, but he kept adding more interest. She said it was impossible. She said we might have to run away, go somewhere he couldn't find us. And then the car hit her. Yeah, Grace's voice was barely audible. We've been hiding ever since. I took the money from Mom's purse, $43. I thought maybe we could take a bus somewhere, but Lily's getting worse and I didn't know where to go. And then tonight she was so cold and she looked up at James, tears streaming down her face. I was so scared she was going to die. James moved to sit beside Grace on the floor. He did not touch her, did not want to frighten her, but he wanted her to know she was not alone. You did the right thing, he said. You kept your sister safe. You found help. That takes courage most adults don't have. I wasn't brave, I was terrified. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what needs to be done, even when you're terrified. James glanced at Lily, peaceful in sleep. Your mom would be proud of you. Grace drew her knees to her chest. What if she's dead? What if we never find her? We'll find her, James said with more confidence than he felt. Sarah's good at her job. If your mom is in a hospital anywhere in this city, we'll know by morning. They sat in silence for a while. The city hummed below them, oblivious to the small drama unfolding in the penthouse. Eventually, Grace's eyelids began to droop. James fetched another blanket and guided her to the couch beside her sister. Get some sleep, he said gently. You're safe here. Grace looked up at him, something unreadable in her expression. Thank you, she whispered. Then she curled around Lily, protective even in sleep, and James was left standing in his vast, empty apartment that suddenly felt full of purpose for the first time in years. His phone buzzed at 5 in the morning. Sarah's name lit up the screen. James grabbed it on the first ring. Tell me you found her. I found her. Sarah's voice was grim. Rebecca Morgan, admitted to County General 3 nights ago. Jane Doe number 47, multiple injuries from a hit and run. She's been in intensive care. James closed his eyes. Is she alive? Alive, yes. But James, she's in a coma, severe head trauma, broken ribs, internal bleeding. The doctors don't know if she'll wake up. The world seemed to tilt beneath his feet. He gripped the phone tighter. Does she have any family listed? Anyone who's been contacted? No one. No ID when she was brought in. They've been trying to identify her through dental records. James, those girls have been alone for 3 days because nobody knew their mother was in the hospital. I need to bring them to see her. That's not protocol. They're minors in your custody without any legal authority. If you show up at the hospital with them, it's going to raise questions. I don't care about questions. They deserve to know their mother is alive. Sarah sighed. Let me make some calls. I'll meet you at County General at 8. But James, after this, we have to involve CPS. I can't keep this off the books forever. Just give me time to figure this out. Time isn't the issue, the law is. After Sarah hung up, James stood in the pre-dawn darkness and watched the girls sleep. Grace had one arm thrown across Lily, even in unconsciousness unwilling to let her go. The stuffed rabbit had fallen to the floor. James picked it up, brushed off imaginary dust, and set it back within Lily's reach. His phone buzzed again. This time it was not Sarah. It was his general counsel, David Preston, and the message made his blood run cold. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 9 a.m. Mandatory attendance. We've received concerning reports about your conduct. Linda Hartwell, board chair. James stared at the screen. Someone had found out about the girls. Someone had reported him. And now the board, the same people who had applauded his $50 million deal last night, were circling like sharks. He set the phone down and looked at Grace and Lily again. 2 children who had no one else. No mother conscious enough to fight for them. No father in the picture. No family willing to step up. Just a 7-year-old girl brave enough to ask a stranger for help, and a 4-year-old too young to understand how close she had come to vanishing forever. James made a decision then. The kind of decision that could cost him everything. His company, his reputation, the empire he had spent 2 decades building. He was going to protect these children. Whatever it took. However long it took. Even if it meant losing everything else. Because for the first time since his father died, James Daniel Sullivan understood what it meant to be worth something. And it had nothing to do with money. When the girls woke, James had breakfast waiting. Pancakes from a mix he had to order delivered because his kitchen had never seen anything so domestic. They were lopsided and slightly burnt, but Grace and Lily ate them like they were the best meal they had ever tasted. We're going to see your mom today, James told them gently. She's in the hospital. She's hurt, but she's alive. Grace's fork clattered to the plate. She's alive? She's alive. Lily looked between them, not quite understanding, but catching her sister's hope. Mommy? Yes, sweetheart. We're going to see Mommy. Grace started to cry then, great heaving sobs of relief and fear and exhaustion. James knelt beside her chair and, after a moment's hesitation, put his hand on her shoulder. She turned and grabbed him, buried her face against his shirt, and cried like the child she was supposed to be. And James held her, this brave little girl who had carried the weight of the world on her 7-year-old shoulders, and promised himself that he would not let her fall. The drive to County General took 30 minutes through morning traffic. Sarah met them in the lobby, her detective's shield clipped to her belt, her expression carefully neutral. Sarah Mitchell, she said, shaking James's hand. Then she crouched to Grace's level. Hi there. I'm a friend of James's. I'm going to help make sure you and your sister are safe, okay? Grace nodded, still holding tight to James's hand. The ICU smelled like antiseptic and fear. Machines beeped their monotonous rhythms. Nurses moved with practiced efficiency between rooms. Sarah spoke quietly to the charge nurse, showed her badge, and gestured to James and the girls. The nurse's expression softened when she saw Grace and Lily. Come with me, she said. She led them to a room at the end of the hall. Through the window, James could see a woman lying motionless in the bed, tubes and wires connecting her to half a dozen machines. Her face was bruised, swollen. Her dark hair spread across the pillow. Grace made a small, broken sound and pressed against James's side. Is that your mom? He asked gently. Grace nodded, unable to speak. The nurse opened the door. 5 minutes, and only the children and one adult. Sarah nodded to James. Go. I'll wait here. James guided Grace and Lily into the room. The machines seemed louder inside, more insistent. Grace approached the bed slowly as if afraid her mother might shatter. Mom, she whispered. Rebecca Morgan did not move, did not open her eyes. The ventilator breathed for her, steady and mechanical. Lily started to cry. Grace climbed onto the bed, careful of all the wires, and took her mother's hand. Mommy, we're here, she said, her voice shaking. We're okay, we found help. His name is James, and he's keeping us safe. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, so subtle James almost missed it, Rebecca's fingers twitched. Her eyelids fluttered. The heart monitor's rhythm changed, picked up speed. The nurse who had been standing in the doorway gasped. That's the first response we've seen in 3 days. James watched as Rebecca's eyes slowly opened, unfocused at first, searching, then landing on her daughter's. Tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. Her lips moved. No sound came out, the ventilator preventing speech, but James could read the word. Safe? Grace leaned closer. Yes, Mommy, we're safe. Rebecca's gaze shifted to James, standing a respectful distance from the bed. There was a question in her eyes. Who are you? Why are you here? James stepped forward. I'm James Sullivan. I found your daughters last night. I promise you, I'll keep them safe until you can do it yourself. Rebecca stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to assess his truthfulness through sheer force of will. Then slowly she nodded, her hand squeezed Grace's fingers. The nurse checked the monitors, made notes on her tablet. This is remarkable. We've been trying to get a response for days. Can she hear us? James asked. We believe so, yes, but she's very weak. The head trauma was severe. We're still not sure about long-term prognosis. James looked at Rebecca, at this woman who had raised 2 incredible daughters on her own, who had fought to protect them even as her own world fell apart. She was a stranger to him, but in that moment, he made her a promise as binding as any contract he had ever signed. I won't let anything happen to them, he said. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, they're safe with me. Rebecca's eyes filled with fresh tears. She mouthed 2 words. Thank you. The nurse ushered them out after 5 minutes, citing hospital policy and patient rest. Grace did not want to leave, but Sarah gently explained that their mom needed to heal and they could come back soon. In the hallway, Sarah pulled James aside while a hospital social worker entertained the girls with coloring books. This is going to get complicated fast, she said quietly. Rebecca's in no condition to make decisions about custody. Vince Carver is still out there. And James, I looked him up, he has a record. Assault, extortion, trafficking charges that were dropped due to lack of evidence. He threatened to sell a 4-year-old child. I know, but we need proof. We need Rebecca to wake up and testify. Until then, those girls are in legal limbo. So what do I do? Sarah studied him carefully. Officially, you involve CPS immediately. You hand the girls over to the system and hope they end up in a decent foster home. The DA is talking about adding stalking and violation of a restraining order. Will it stick? With your testimony and the girl's statements? Absolutely, this guy's going away for a long time. James looked out at the storm, at the ocean churning black and violent beyond the bluff. He said Rebecca owes him $30,000, that he was coming to collect. Loan sharking, we can add that to the charges. Sarah sat down beside him. James, this is going to get messy. There'll be a trial. The girls will have to testify, and the media is going to have a field day. I don't care about the media. You should, because Catherine is already talking to reporters. She's claiming you put those children in danger by bringing them here, that a responsible person would have left them in the system. Rage, hot and immediate, flooded through him. She's doing this on purpose, trying to destroy me. Probably. She still owns 15% of Biogenesis. Let them try, he said. Sarah raised an eyebrow. You'd really risk everything for 2 children you met 12 hours ago? James looked at Grace, who was drawing what appeared to be a family. 4 stick figures holding hands. Mom, me, Lily, and a taller figure labeled with careful letters. Guardian Angel. Yeah, he said quietly. I really would. Because in 12 hours, these 2 children had done something his ex-wife never managed in 10 years of marriage. They had made him feel like he mattered for something beyond his bank account. They had reminded him what his father meant when he said that helping people was what made a man worth anything. James Daniel Sullivan had spent 28 years building an empire. Maybe it was time to find out if that empire could hold up under the weight of something that actually meant something. The girls fell asleep in the car on the way back to the penthouse, exhausted by emotion and relief. James carried Lily while Grace stumbled along beside him, barely conscious. He tucked them both into the guest bedroom, drew the curtains against the afternoon sun, and stood in the doorway watching them sleep. His phone buzzed, another message. This one from Catherine. James, what the hell are you doing? TMZ has photos of you with 2 children. This looks terrible. Call me. He deleted the message without responding. Whatever Catherine wanted to say, he did not need to hear it. Instead, he sat down at his desk and began making a list. Lawyer, family law specialist, check Vince Carver's background, set up security, talk to the board, protect Grace and Lily at all costs. The path ahead was unclear. The risks were enormous. But for the first time in longer than he could remember, James felt certain he was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. And when Grace appeared in the doorway an hour later, rubbing sleep from her eyes, and asked in a small voice if he was going to send them away, James knelt down to her level and looked her straight in the eye. No, he said, I made your mom a promise, and I'm going to keep it. Grace studied his face for a long moment. Then she did something that nearly broke him. She stepped forward and wrapped her thin arms around his neck. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder. Thank you for not leaving us alone. James held her carefully, this fierce little protector who deserved so much better than the hand life had dealt her, and made a silent vow. Whatever came next, whatever battles he had to fight, whatever he had to sacrifice, he would not let these children down. Not now, not ever. The boardroom of Biogenesis Medical Technologies occupied the entire 52nd floor, all glass and chrome, and the calculated brutality of corporate power. 12 faces stared at James across the conference table, and not one of them looked friendly. Linda Hartwell sat at the far end, her silver hair pulled back in a style that cost more than most people made in a month. She had been on the board since the company's inception, had made millions from James's vision and drive, and now she looked at him like he was a liability she needed to cut loose. James, her voice carried the weight of practiced authority. Thank you for joining us on such short notice. He took his seat at the head of the table, the CEO's chair that suddenly felt like an electric chair. Linda, everyone, I assume this is about the situation with the Morgan children. Situation. Richard Chen, the CFO, leaned forward. That's an interesting way to describe harboring unrelated minors without any legal authority. I provided emergency shelter to 2 children in danger. I contacted the police immediately. Detective Sarah Mitchell can verify every detail. Detective Mitchell is your college friend, Linda said. Hardly an impartial witness. James kept his voice level, controlled. What would you have had me do? Leave them in a parking garage? 2 little girls alone, freezing, with a violent criminal hunting them? You should have called Child Protective Services, said Margaret Yee, the head of legal. Followed proper protocol. Instead, you exposed this company to massive legal liability. Liability, James tasted the word, found it bitter. Is that what we're calling basic human decency now? Linda's expression hardened. We're calling it a PR nightmare. TMZ has photos of you with these children. The speculation online is vicious. Some people think you're a hero. Others think you're something far worse. I don't care what TMZ thinks. Well, you should. Richard slid a tablet across the table. Our stock dropped 3% yesterday. Investors are spooked. We have a $50 million deal hanging in the balance, and the venture capital firm is asking questions about your judgment. James glanced at the tablet, saw the headlines. Tech CEO's mystery children. Billionaire's secret family. The photos showed him carrying Lily into his building, Grace holding his hand. Taken by paparazzi with telephoto lenses, the images looked intimate, suspicious, open to the worst possible interpretations. These are two innocent children, he said quietly. Their mother is in a coma. They have no one else. That's very noble, Linda said. But nobility doesn't protect shareholder value. James, we need you focused. We need you present. We cannot have our CEO embroiled in a custody battle or worse, criminal charges. Criminal charges? James felt anger rising in his chest, hot and dangerous. For what? Providing food and shelter? For acting without legal authority? For potentially interfering with a police investigation? For, Linda paused, choosing her words carefully, creating the appearance of impropriety. The door to the boardroom opened. Catherine Brennan walked in, and James felt the ground shift beneath his feet. She wore a charcoal suit, her blonde hair perfect, her presence radiating the confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. Catherine, Linda said warmly, thank you for coming. James looked between them. What is she doing here? I'm a shareholder, Catherine said smoothly. I have a right to attend board meetings when matters of corporate governance are being discussed. You sold most of your shares in the divorce. I retained 15%, more than enough to have a voice. She took a seat, crossed her legs, studied him with cool appraisal. Hello, James. You look tired. He did not respond, could not trust himself to speak without saying something he would regret. Linda cleared her throat. Catherine has brought some concerns to our attention. Concerns about your mental state, your decision-making capacity. My mental state is fine. Sit? Catherine leaned forward. James, you're keeping two strange children in your apartment. You've ignored calls from your executive team. You've prioritized this personal crusade over a $50 million deal. That doesn't sound like the James Sullivan I knew. The James Sullivan you knew, he said slowly, put work before everything else, including our marriage. Maybe that's exactly what needs to change. Change is one thing, self-destruction is another. Catherine's voice carried a note of false concern, the kind she had perfected in courtrooms. I know you, James. I know you've been struggling since the divorce. And now this, taking in children as some kind of replacement for the family we never had? It's concerning. The implication hung in the air like poison. That he was unstable. That these children were a symptom of some deeper breakdown. That he could not be trusted to lead the company he had built from nothing. James stood. Let me make this very clear. Grace and Lily Morgan are under my protection until their mother recovers or until a legal guardian is appointed. I am working with SFPD to ensure their safety. I have not neglected my duties to this company. The $50 million deal is signed. Our quarterly targets are on track, and my personal life is not up for discussion. Your personal life became our business the moment it hit the new, Richard said. Then here's what I suggest. James placed both hands on the table, leaned forward. Vote, right now. If you want me out, remove me. But understand that I built this company. I hold controlling interest. And if you try to force me out without cause, I will fight you with every resource I have. The room fell silent. Linda exchanged glances with Catherine, with Richard, with the other board members. We're not trying to remove you, Linda said finally. We're trying to protect you and the company. James, please, think about what you're risking. I know exactly what I'm risking, and I've made my choice. He walked out before anyone could respond, leaving 12 board members and his ex-wife staring after him in stunned silence. In the elevator, his hands shook. Not from fear, from rage. From the realization that these people he had worked with for years, who had profited from his vision, saw him as nothing more than an asset to be managed or disposed of. His phone rang. Sarah. How bad was it? She asked. About as bad as it could be. Well, it's about to get worse. I just got a call from Vince Carver's lawyer. James felt ice slide down his spine. What does he want? He's claiming you're holding the girls illegally. He says he's their uncle, has a right to see them. He's threatening to sue you for $50 million dollars and go to the media with his story. He's lying. Grace told me he's not family. I know, but he's smart. He's making himself look like the victim, the concerned family member being kept from his nieces by a rich man with too much power. James closed his eyes. What do? We document everything, every conversation, every interaction. And James, you need a lawyer, a good one, family law specialist, because this is going to get messy. He thanked Sarah and hung up. The elevator reached the lobby. Outside, he could see news vans gathering, reporters with cameras. The feeding frenzy had begun. James took the stairs to the parking garage instead, avoiding the media circus. He drove home through midday traffic, mind racing with strategy and contingency plans. But when he opened the door to his penthouse and found Grace helping Lily draw pictures at the dining table, all the corporate politics faded into background noise. James, Lily's face lit up. She had started calling him by name sometime during the night, her shyness melting under the warmth of safety. Look what I made. She held up a crayon drawing of what appeared to be a house by the ocean. Stick figures stood in front of it, holding hands. It's beautiful, James said honestly. Grace looked up at him, and he could see the question in her eyes. How did it go? What happens to us now? We need to talk, he said gently. He sat down with them, explained in terms they could understand that some people were upset about them staying with him, that there might be legal challenges ahead, that a man claiming to be their uncle was trying to cause trouble. Grace's expression hardened. Vince, he's not our uncle. He's a liar. I know, and we're going to prove it. But in the meantime, I think we need to go somewhere safer, somewhere he can't find us. Where? Lily asked, her voice small. James thought of the beach house, his father's final gift, a weathered cottage on the coast that James had barely visited in the last decade. It was 40 miles from San Francisco, isolated, easy to secure. I know a place, he said, by the ocean. Would you like that? Lily's eyes went wide. The ocean? Like in my picture? Exactly like in your picture. Grace studied him carefully. And we'll be safe there? I promise. That evening, James made arrangements. He called the property management company, had the house opened and heated. He hired a security firm to install cameras and motion sensors. He contacted Sarah, told her where they would be, got her assurance that patrol cars would drive by regularly. Then he packed. Clothes for himself, clothes for the girls that had been delivered in waves over the past 2 days. Toy and books and the stuffed rabbit that Lily would not let out of her sight. At County General, Rebecca was awake more often now, though still too weak to speak much. James brought the girls to visit, watched as Rebecca held their hands and cried silent tears of relief and gratitude. When he explained they were moving to a safe house, Rebecca nodded understanding, her eyes communicating what her voice could not. Keep them safe, please. I will, James promised. They left San Francisco on December 18th, just as the sun was setting over the bay. The drive south took them along Highway 1, the ocean vast and dark on their left, the mountains rising shadowed on their right. Lily fell asleep in her car seat. Grace stayed awake, watching the world pass by with solemn attention. Have you ever seen the ocean? James asked. Only in pictures, Grace said. Mom always said she'd take us someday, when she had enough money. Well, James said it softly, today's that day. The beach house materialized out of the coastal fog like something from a dream. It sat on a bluff overlooking Half Moon Bay, weathered shingles and wide porches and windows that faced the endless Pacific. James's father had bought it 40 years ago, back when the area was still affordable, when a dock worker's savings could stretch to a small piece of paradise. James had not been here since his father's funeral. Walking through the door felt like stepping into memory, all the furniture covered in white sheets, like ghosts of better times. But Grace did not see ghosts. She saw possibility. She ran from room to room, Lily toddling after her, exclaiming over the fireplace and the big windows and the staircase that led to a loft bedroom. Can we stay here forever? Lily asked, spinning in circles in the living room. As long as you need, James said. He pulled the sheets off the furniture, turned up the heat, made the house come alive again. That night, they ate takeout Chinese food on the floor in front of the fireplace, and James told them stories about his father. How Michael Sullivan had worked the Boston docks to save enough money to bring his family to California. How he had died too young but lived big. How he had taught James that money meant nothing if you did not use it to help people. He sounds nice, Grace said quietly. He was the best man I ever knew. Do you miss him? James looked at the fire, at the way the flames danced and shifted. Every single day. Grace leaned against his shoulder, a gesture of trust that meant more than she could possibly know. I miss my mom. She's getting better. Every day. A little stronger. What if Vince finds us? James put his arm around her. Then I'll deal with him. But he won't. I promise. The days that followed had a dreamlike quality. Mornings on the beach, collecting shells and watching the fog burn off under winter sun. Afternoons inside, doing schoolwork that James ordered online, reading books, playing games. Evenings by the fire, the three of them together in the warm glow while the ocean roared in the darkness beyond the windows. Rebecca was discharged to a rehabilitation facility on December 23rd. She could speak now, though her words came slow and careful. James brought the girls to see her, watch the reunion with a tight throat. Thank you, Rebecca said to him, her hand gripping his, for everything. You would have done the same. No, I mean it. You saved my daughter's lives. Tears tracked down her face. I don't know how to repay that. You don't owe me anything. Just get better. In the car on the way back to the beach house, Grace was quiet. James glanced at her in the rearview mirror. You okay? I was so scared she was going to die, Grace said softly. For 3 days, I thought I'd never see her again. She's tough, like you. Will she be able to come home soon? The doctors think maybe another month. She needs to heal, get her strength back. And then what happens to us? It was the question James had been avoiding, because the truth was he did not know. Rebecca would recover. She would want her daughters back. And James, who had no legal right to these children, would have to let them go. The thought hurt more than he wanted to admit. Then your mom takes care of you, he said, like she always has. But even as he said it, he wondered what would happen to Vince, to the debt, to all the dangers that had driven Rebecca to the edge in the first place. Christmas Eve arrived with surprising warmth, the California winter offering a rare perfect day. James drove into town and bought a small tree, decorations, gifts for the girls that he wrapped clumsily while they slept. He hung lights on the porch, strung garland over the fireplace, and tried to create the kind of Christmas his father used to make. Grace and Lily woke to find the house transformed. They gasped and laughed and ran to the tree, touching ornaments with careful wonder. Santa came, Lily squealed. Grace looked at James, and in her eyes he saw understanding beyond her years. She knew there was no Santa. She knew it was him, and she was grateful in a way that made his chest ache. They opened presents, warm clothes and books and art supplies, a new stuffed animal for Lily, a journal for Grace. Simple things, but received with a joy that shamed James for every expensive, meaningless gift he had ever bought. For dinner, James attempted to cook a turkey. It was an unmitigated disaster. The bird came out dry and somehow simultaneously undercooked. The side dishes were either burned or cold. They ate mac and cheese instead, laughing at the culinary catastrophe. This is the best Christmas ever, Lily announced, her face smeared with cheese. Grace smiled, a real smile, unguarded and bright. Yeah, it really is. That night, after the girls had gone to bed, James stood on the porch and looked out at the ocean. The stars were brilliant in the clear sky, the Milky Way a river of light overhead. He thought about the year behind him. The divorce, the loneliness, the empty success. And then he thought about the year ahead, about Grace and Lily and Rebecca, about the choice he had made to step into their lives, to carry some of their burden. He did not regret it, not for a second. His phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Merry Christmas, Mr. Sullivan. Enjoy it while you can. You can't hide them forever. No signature, but James knew who it was from. Vince. Somehow, some way, he had gotten James's private number. The threat was clear. This was not over. James deleted the message but could not delete the cold fear that settled in his gut. He increased the security patrols, checked the cameras obsessively, slept lightly, listening for sounds that did not belong. The week between Christmas and New Year passed in tense quiet. Grace seemed to sense his worry, stayed closer, watched the windows with wary eyes. Lily remained blissfully unaware, happy in her child's bubble of present-tense existence. On December 30th, the weather turned. A massive storm system rolled in from the Pacific, an atmospheric river that promised days of rain and wind. The Weather Service issued warnings. The ocean turned gray and violent, waves crashing against the bluff with primordial fury. James secured the house, brought in firewood, made sure they had food and water in case the power went out. By evening, the rain was coming down in sheets, the wind howling around the corners of the house like something alive. I don't like storms, Grace said, curled up on the couch with Lily. We're safe here, James assured her. This house has weathered 100 storms. But even as he said it, he felt uneasy. Some instinct, some sixth sense developed over years of business negotiations where betrayal could come from anywhere. At 7 o'clock, the power flickered. Once, twice, then died completely, plunging the house into darkness, broken only by the fire in the fireplace. James grabbed flashlights from the kitchen, handed one to Grace. Stay here with Lily. I'm going to check the circuit breaker. Don't leave us, Lily whimpered. I'll be right back, I promise. He made his way to the utility closet, his flashlight beam cutting through the dark. The circuit breaker looked fine. Nothing tripped, which meant the outage was external, probably a downed power line somewhere in the storm. He was turning to go back to the living room when he heard it. A sound that did not belong. The creak of the back door opening. James froze. The back door had been locked. He had checked it himself not an hour ago. He moved quietly through the kitchen, every sense suddenly alert. Through the window, he could see the door swinging open in the wind. And there, barely visible in the rain, muddy footprints tracked across the porch. Someone had broken in. Terror flooded his system, sharp and cold. He ran back to the living room, his heart hammering against his ribs. Grace and Lily were gone. The couch sat empty. Lily's stuffed rabbit lay abandoned on the floor. And in the firelight, James could see the wet footprints leading from the back door to where the girls had been sitting. Grace, he shouted. Lily! A sound from the hallway. James spun toward it, and there, standing in the shadows, was a man he had never seen but recognized instantly from Sarah's description. Vince Carver, tall, muscular, holding a tire iron in one hand and a flashlight in the other. Behind him, pressed against the wall, Grace held Lily, both of them trembling with terror. Well, Vince said, his voice smooth and cold, isn't this cozy? The rich hero in his little charity cases. James stepped between Vince and the girls, every protective instinct screaming. Get out of my house. Your house? This is cute. You really think you can keep them from me? I'm calling the police. Go ahead. By the time they get here in this storm, I'll be gone. With what's mine. They're not yours, Vince smiled. It was the most terrifying expression James had ever seen. Rebecca owes me $30,000. I'm here to collect. And little Lily there, she's worth a lot more than 30 grand to the right buyer. Grace's voice, small but fierce. I won't let you take her. Grace, baby, come to Uncle Vince. Your mom wants you back. You're lying. You heard her. James saw Vince's hand tighten on the tire iron, saw the calculation in his eyes, and knew with absolute certainty that this man would not hesitate to hurt anyone who stood between him and what he wanted. Get behind me, James said quietly to the girls. Now, Grace pulled Lily back, both of them moving toward the fireplace. Vince took a step forward, and James matched it, keeping himself between them. You're making this harder than it needs to be, Vince said. I don't want to hurt you. Just give me the girls and we can all walk away. That's never going to happen. Really? You're willing to die for 2 kids you met 2 weeks ago? James thought of his father, of the man who had worked himself to death to give his family a better life, of the lesson James had spent 28 years trying to learn. Yes, he said simply. Vince lunged. The tire iron swung toward James's head. He ducked, felt the wind of it passing, drove his shoulder into Vince's midsection. They crashed into the wall, the impact rattling picture frames. Vince brought the tire iron down on James's shoulder, and pain exploded through his body. James grabbed for the weapon, got his hand around it, wrenched it sideways. They struggled, 2 men fighting in the dark while the storm raged outside and the girl screamed. Then, like salvation, blue lights flashed through the windows. Sirens cut through the howl of wind. Police! Freeze! The front door burst open. Sarah came through first, weapon drawn, 2 uniformed officers behind her. Vince tried to run, but one of the officers tackled him, drove him to the floor. Vincent Carver, you're under arrest for breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping. They dragged him out, still struggling, still shouting threats. Sarah holstered her weapon and turned to James, who stood swaying, his shoulder throbbing, his whole body shaking with adrenaline. You okay? How did you know? Security system sent an alert when the back door opened. I was already on my way to check on you because of the storm. She looked at the girls huddled together by the fireplace. Thank God I came. James walked to Grace and Lily on legs that felt like water. He knelt down, pulled them into his arms, and held them while they cried. It's over, he said, his voice rough. You're safe, I promise, it's over. But even as he said it, he knew it was not quite true. Vince was arrested, yes, but the legal battle was just beginning. The custody fight, the media circus. The thousand complications that came with trying to protect two children from a system that did not always protect the vulnerable. Outside, the storm continued to rage. Inside, James held Grace and Lily and made a promise to himself and to them and to Rebecca. Whatever came next, whatever battles he had to fight, he would not let these children down. Not now, not ever. The price of that promise was starting to become clear. His company, his reputation, his old life. But looking at Grace's tear-stained face, at Lily's trembling form, at the trust in their eyes despite everything they had been through, James knew it was a price worth paying. Some things mattered more than money. Some promises were worth keeping, no matter the cost. And some families were not born, they were chosen. The paramedics arrived 20 minutes after the police, their ambulance cutting through the storm, with lights that painted the rain red and white. James sat on the porch steps while they examined his shoulder, the bruise already blooming dark purple beneath his shirt. Inside, Grace and Lily huddled with Sarah, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot chocolate that one of the officers had made. "You're lucky," the paramedic said, pressing gently on the injury. "No fracture, but you'll be sore for weeks." Lucky, James almost laughed. He had been attacked in his own home, had fought a man twice his size while two terrified children watched, had come within inches of losing everything that mattered. But Grace and Lily were safe. Vince was in handcuffs in the back of a patrol car, and somehow, against all odds, they had survived. "I'll take lucky," James said. Sarah came out onto the porch, her jacket soaked through, her expression grim. "Vince is headed to county jail. We've got him on breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted kidnapping. The DA is talking about adding stalking in violation of a restraining order. Will it stick? With your testimony and the girl's statements? Absolutely. This guy's going away for a long time." James looked out at the storm, at the ocean churning black and violent beyond the bluff. He said Rebecca owes him $30,000, that he was coming to collect. "Loan sharking, we can add that to the charges." Sarah sat down beside him. "James, this is going to get messy. There'll be a trial. The girls will have to testify, and the media is going to have a field day." "I don't care about the media." "You should, because Catherine is already talking to reporters. She's claiming you put those children in danger by bringing them here, that a responsible person would have left them in the system." Rage, hot and immediate, flooded through him. "She's doing this on purpose, trying to destroy me." "Probably. She still owns 15% of Biogenesis. If the stock price drops far enough, she can buy more shares cheap. Take control." James closed his eyes. The corporate maneuvering, the backstabbing, the endless game of power and money. It all felt so distant now, so utterly meaningless. "Let her try," he said quietly. "I'm done playing that game." Sarah studied him for a long moment. "You mean that, don't you?" "I've spent 28 years building an empire. And for what? So I could stand in an empty penthouse every night and feel nothing?" He looked at Sarah, and she could see something had fundamentally shifted in him. "Those two girls in there have given me more purpose in 2 weeks than I've found in 2 decades of business. Even if it costs you everything. Especially if it cost me everything." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then you're going to need a good lawyer, because the custody battle is just beginning." And the lawyer Sarah recommended was named Patricia Oakes, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She met with James at the beach house 3 days after the attack, while Grace and Lily played on the beach under the watchful eye of a security guard James had hired. Patricia spread files across the dining table, reading glasses perched on her nose. "I've reviewed the case. Here's where we stand. Vincent Carver is in jail awaiting trial. That's the good news. The bad news is that Rebecca Morgan is still in rehabilitation, unable to care for her children, which means legally Grace and Lily are wards of the state." "I have them," James said. "You have them informally, but Child Protective Services is going to want to formalize the arrangement, which means foster care." The words landed like a blow. "No, they're not going into foster care. Then we need to establish legal guardianship, which requires proving that you're fit, stable, and have a genuine relationship with the children." Patricia looked at him over her glasses. "Can you prove that?" James thought of the last 2 weeks, the late-night conversations with Grace, the way Lily had started calling him by name, running to him when she was scared, the drawings taped to his refrigerator, the small routines they had built together. Yes, he said, I can prove that. Patricia nodded. Good, because Catherine Sullivan and her lawyers are going to argue the opposite. They're going to paint you as unstable, impulsive, using these children to fill a void in your life. That's not true. Truth doesn't always matter in court. What matters is the narrative. She pulled out another file. We need character witnesses, people who can testify to your stability, your commitment, your genuine care for these children. Over the next week, James prepared for battle. Sarah agreed to testify about the circumstances of how he found the girls, about his cooperation with police, about his protection of them during Vince's attack. The nurses from County General provided statements about how Rebecca's condition had improved dramatically when she saw her daughters, how James had visited daily, had paid her medical bills without being asked. Grace's teacher, after just 1 week of homeschooling sessions James had arranged, wrote a letter describing Grace's transformation from a frightened, withdrawn child to one who was beginning to smile again, to engage, to hope. And Rebecca herself, still weak but determined, recorded a video statement from her rehabilitation facility. James Sullivan saved my daughter's lives, she said into the camera, her voice stronger than it had been. When I was unconscious in a hospital bed when they had no one, he stepped up. He protected them. He gave them safety and love and hope. Tears tracked down her face. I will spend the rest of my life being grateful for that. And when I'm well enough, I want him to remain part of their lives, because he's proven himself to be the kind of man every child deserves. James watched the video alone in his office and had to stop it halfway through because he could not see the screen through his tears. The criminal trial of Vincent Carver began on February 15th in a San Francisco courtroom that smelled like old wood and older justice. James sat in the gallery with Sarah on one side and Patricia on the other. Rebecca attended in a wheelchair, still too weak to walk far but refusing to miss this moment. Grace and Lily waited in a separate room with a victim's advocate, prepared to testify if needed. The prosecutor was a woman named Elena Rodriguez, a career DA with a reputation for demolishing defense arguments. She stood before the jury, 12 faces ranging from bored to curious, and laid out the case with methodical precision. Vincent Carver is a predator, she said simply. He targets vulnerable women, he traps them in debt, and when they cannot pay, he takes what he wants by force. She gestured to the evidence table, where photos of Rebecca's injuries were displayed. He put Rebecca Morgan in the hospital. He stalked her children. He broke into a private home with the intent to kidnap a 4-year-old girl and sell her to human traffickers. The defense attorney, a public defender who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, tried to argue that Vince was simply trying to collect a legitimate debt, that he had been unfairly demonized, that his break into the beach house was a misunderstanding. Elena destroyed him. She called Sarah to the stand first. The detective described finding the girls in the parking garage, the investigation that revealed Vince's criminal history, the night of the attack. When I entered the house, Sarah said, her voice steady, I found Mr. Carver holding a tire iron over Mr. Sullivan's head. The children were screaming. It was clear he intended violence. And what did Mr. Carver say when you arrested him? He said, and I quote, "Those kids are mine. That little blonde one is worth 50 grand. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. The jury's expressions shifted from neutral to horrified. Next came the hospital records. The doctor who had treated Rebecca testified about the severity of her injuries, about how a hit and run had nearly killed her. The evidence suggested the car had been aiming for her, not a random accident. Then Rebecca took the stand. She looked small in the witness chair, still fragile from her injuries, but her voice carried a strength that filled the room. Vincent Carver was my boyfriend for 6 months, he said. At first he seemed kind, generous, but that was a mask. Once he had me, he became controlling, violent. He got me fired from my job. He isolated me from my friends. And when my daughter Lily got sick and I needed money for her medical bills, he offered to help. What were the terms of this help? Elena asked. He said he would loan me $30,000. No interest, he said. Pay it back when I could. Rebecca's jaw tightened. But that was a lie. He started charging 40% interest. Within 3 months, the debt had ballooned to over $50,000. When I said I couldn't pay, he said there were other ways to settle accounts. What did he mean by that? Rebecca looked directly at Vince, who sat stone-faced at the defense table. He said he knew people who paid good money for pretty little girls, that Lily could wipe out my debt and then some. The courtroom erupted. The judge had to bang his gavel 3 times to restore order. And when you refused, Elena prompted. He beat me, put me in the hospital, and when I got out, he was waiting. He said next time, he would just take Lily and I would never see her again. Rebecca's voice broke. So I told my daughters to run if they ever saw him coming. And 3 days later, a car hit me while I was walking home from work. I don't remember much after that, but I know my girls ran and thank God they found someone who actually cared. She was looking at James when she said it. The defense attorney tried to poke holes in her story, tried to suggest she was exaggerating, that she had been a willing participant in whatever illegal activities Vince was involved in. But Rebecca held firm, answering every question with calm clarity, and by the time she stepped down, the jury was ready to convict. Then came the moment everyone had been dreading. The judge called Grace to the stand. James watched as the 7-year-old walked into the courtroom, her hand gripped tight by the victim's advocate. She looked so small up there, dwarfed by the witness chair, but she sat up straight and met the prosecutor's eyes with a courage that broke James's heart. Elena approached gently. Grace, do you know why you're here today? To tell the truth about Vince. That's right, and do you promise to tell the truth? I promise. Good. Can you tell the jury about the night your mom got hurt? Grace took a breath. We were walking home. It was dark. Mom was holding my hand. Lily was in her stroller. A car came really fast. It didn't have its lights on. Mom pushed the stroller away and the car hit her instead. Did you see who was driving? No, but I heard Vince's voice. He yelled something out the window. What did he yell? Grace's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. He said, "You can't run from me." The courtroom went silent. Several jurors were crying. Elena continued, her voice soft. What happened after that? People came. Ambulances. I grabbed Lily and we hid. Because Mom always said if Vince came, we should run and hide. Grace wiped her eyes. We hid for 3 days. It was so cold. And I was so scared. I thought Mom was dead. I thought Vince was going to find us and take Lily and I would never see her again. But then you found Mr. Sullivan. Grace nodded. In the parking garage. He was nice. He asked if we needed help. She looked at James and her face softened. I asked him to take Lily and leave me behind, because Lily's the good one. She deserves to be safe. And what did Mr. Sullivan say? He said no one was being left behind, that he was going to keep both of us safe. Grace's voice strengthened. And he did. Even when Vince broke into the house and tried to hurt us, James protected us. He fought Vince even though Vince had a weapon. He could have gotten killed, but he didn't care. He just wanted to keep us safe. Elena let that sit with the jury for a moment. Then she asked, Grace, do you see the man who threatened you and your sister in this courtroom today? Grace looked directly at Vince. Yes, that's him. Let the record show the witness has identified the defendant. Elena smiled gently at Grace. Thank you, sweetheart. You are very brave. The defense attorney declined to cross-examine a 7-year-old, which was probably the smartest decision he made all trial. After 2 days of testimony, after evidence and expert witnesses and crime scene photos, the jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. The foreman stood. On the charge of assault with a deadly weapon, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted kidnapping, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of stalking, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy to commit human trafficking, we find the defendant guilty. Guilty on all counts, Rebecca sobbed. James felt something release in his chest, a tension he had been carrying for weeks. Sarah squeezed his hand. The sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman with kind eyes, looked down at Vince with undisguised contempt. Mr. Carver, you are a predator of the worst kind. You prey on the vulnerable. You terrorize children. You view human beings as commodities to be bought and sold. She paused. This court sentences you to 18 years in state prison, with no eligibility for parole for 12 years. You will also be subject to a permanent restraining order prohibiting any contact with Rebecca Morgan or her children. Vince was dragged from the courtroom, still shouting threats, still promising revenge, but his voice faded into nothing, and he was gone. Outside on the courthouse steps, Rebecca hugged James so hard he thought his ribs might crack. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for giving us justice. But the legal battle was not over yet. 1 week later, James found himself back in court. Not criminal court this time, but family court, where Judge Patricia Owens presided over custody cases with a reputation for putting children's welfare above all else. Catherine's lawyers had filed a motion arguing that Rebecca was unfit to care for her children, that James was an unstable influence, and that the girls should be placed in foster care until a proper evaluation could be conducted. Patricia Oakes stood before the judge with a stack of evidence 3 inches thick. Your Honor, my client James Sullivan has provided exemplary care for Grace and Lily Morgan for the past 2 months. He has ensured their safety, their education, their emotional well-being. He has cooperated fully with law enforcement and social services. He has paid for their mother's medical care without being asked. And most importantly, he has given these children something they desperately needed: stability, safety, love. She called witness after witness. The teachers who described how Grace had blossomed under James's care. The therapist who testified that both girls showed remarkable improvement in their trauma symptoms. Sarah, who detailed James's cooperation and commitment. And finally, Rebecca herself, walking into the courtroom without a wheelchair for the first time, still moving slowly but determined. I am their mother, she said from the witness stand, and when I am fully recovered, I will resume full custody. But until that time, I want James Sullivan to serve as their legal guardian. Not some stranger, not the foster system. James, because he has earned their trust and mine. Catherine's lawyer tried to argue that James was using the children to assuage his guilt over his failed marriage, over his empty life, that he would lose interest once the novelty wore off. Judge Owens cut him off mid-sentence. I've heard enough. Here is my ruling. She looked at James, at Rebecca, at the social workers and lawyers crowding the courtroom. Rebecca Morgan will retain full custody of her daughters, effective upon her medical clearance to resume parenting duties. In the interim, James Sullivan is granted temporary legal guardianship with full authority to make decisions regarding the children's welfare, education, and medical care. She paused. Let the weight of her words sink in. Furthermore, upon Ms. Morgan's recovery, Mr. Sullivan may petition for permanent co-guardianship if all parties agree. Because from what I've seen in this courtroom today, these children have found a family, and this court will not tear that family apart. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. James felt Grace's hand slip into his, felt Lily's arms wrap around his waist, felt Rebecca's grateful smile from across the room, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he felt complete. 6 months passed in a blur of new routines and healing. Rebecca moved into the beach house, taking one of the guest rooms while she completed her physical therapy. James bought the house next door, a smaller cottage that kept him close but gave the family space to breathe and grow. Grace enrolled in the local elementary school and made friends for the first time in years. She joined the school's creative writing club and started working on a novel about a guardian angel who saves lost children. Lily bloomed like a flower finally given sun. Her nightmares faded. Her laughter became a constant soundtrack to life at the beach. She started kindergarten and brought home drawings every day, always with the same 4 stick figures: Mom, Grace, Lily, and James. Rebecca returned to nursing, taking a position at the community health clinic where she specialized in helping domestic violence survivors. She started a support group that met weekly, creating a network of women helping women escape the kind of horror she had lived through. And James, who had spent 2 decades building a medical technology empire, stepped back from day-to-day operations of biogenesis. He remained chairman, but his real passion now was the foundation. The Sullivan Family Foundation launched in September with a mission statement that made Rebecca cry when she read it: to provide support, resources, and hope to single parents escaping domestic violence, and to children in need of protection. The opening gala was held at the beach house. The back lawn transformed into an elegant event space overlooking the ocean. 200 people attended: survivors, donors, local officials, people who understood that protecting the vulnerable was not just charity, it was moral imperative. James gave a speech that night, standing at a podium with the sunset painting the sky gold and purple behind him. 6 months ago, I was a man who had everything and nothing. I had built a successful company. I had money, status, respect. But I was completely alone. And then 2 little girls taught me what actually matters. He looked at Grace and Lily, standing with the Rebecca at the front of the crowd. Family isn't always blood. Sometimes it's the people who choose to stay when staying is hard. Sometimes it's the bonds we forge in crisis that prove stronger than anything else. He paused, gathering his thoughts. This foundation exists because no child should have to huddle in a parking garage cold and afraid. Because no parent should have to choose between safety and poverty. Because every person deserves a second chance at life. His voice grew stronger. In our first year, we've helped 500 families. We've provided emergency housing, legal services, therapy, job training. We've given people hope, and we're just getting started. The crowd erupted in applause. Grace and Lily ran up on stage and hugged him, and somewhere in the audience, someone took a photo that would end up on the foundation's website, capturing the moment perfectly. After the speeches and the dinner and the dancing, after the last guests had left and the caterers had packed up, James walked down to the beach. The moon was full, casting silver light across the water. He stood at the edge of the tide, feeling the cold Pacific foam around his ankles, and heard footsteps behind him. Rebecca. She came to stand beside him, close enough that their shoulders touched. "That was a beautiful speech," she said. "I meant every word." "I know you did." She turned to face him, and in the moonlight he could see tears on her cheeks. "James, I don't know how to thank you for everything you've done. You saved my daughters. You saved me. You gave us a life I never thought we could have. You don't need to thank me. You gave me something too." "What's that?" "A reason to be worth something." He looked at her, at this woman who had fought through hell to protect her children, who had rebuilt herself from broken pieces. "I spent so long chasing success, but I never felt successful until I helped you, until I had Grace and Lily to care for. You gave me purpose, Rebecca. You gave me family." She reached for his hand. He laced his fingers through hers, and they stood like that for a long moment, the ocean rolling eternal before them. "The girls asked me something today," Rebecca said softly. "What?" "They asked if you were going to marry me." James's heart stopped. "What did you tell them?" "I told them that grown-ups don't rush these things, that we're taking our time, building something real." She squeezed his hand. "But between you and me, I hope the answer is yes. Someday." James turned to fully face her. "Rebecca Morgan, I have loved you since the moment I saw you wake up in that hospital bed and squeeze your daughter's hands. I have loved watching you fight and heal and become stronger every day. And if you'll have me, I would be honored to spend the rest of my life loving you and Grace and Lily." "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet. When I propose, it'll be perfect. It'll be a moment worthy of you." He smiled. "But consider this my declaration of intent." Rebecca laughed, and the sound was like music. "Then I declare my intent right back." She kissed him then, soft and sweet, and the ocean whispered its approval. 3 months later, on a perfect December afternoon, exactly 1 year after James had found two girls shivering in a parking garage, he took Rebecca and Grace and Lily back to that same beach house for what he said was just a quiet family dinner. But when they arrived, the porch was strung with lights. Candles lined the path to the beach, and at the water's edge, a small gathering of their closest friends waited. Sarah, Patricia, the nurses from County General, Rebecca's support group, Grace's teacher, Lily's kindergarten class, everyone who had been part of their journey. Rebecca's hand flew to her mouth. "James, what is this?" He knelt down first to Grace and Lily, taking their hands. "I want to ask your mom a very important question, but I need to ask you too first. Would it be okay with you if I became your dad, for real and forever?" Grace started crying immediately. Lily threw her arms around his neck. "Yes," they said in unison. James stood, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it to reveal a simple gold band with 3 small diamonds. One for each of the girls, one for Rebecca, one for the family they had become. "Rebecca Morgan, you are the strongest, bravest, most incredible woman I have ever known. You have taught me what courage looks like, what love means, what family is." He knelt in the sand, the ocean rolling behind him, their friends and daughters watching. "Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you and loving you and being the man you and the girls deserve?" Rebecca was sobbing now, happy tears streaming down her face. "Yes," she said. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring on her finger, stood, and kissed her while everyone cheered. Grace and Lily jumped up and down, shouting about weddings and dresses and being flower girls. The wedding happened 2 months later, a small ceremony on the beach house deck overlooking the Pacific. Judge Owens officiated, calling it the most joyful legal proceeding she had ever conducted. Sarah served as maid of honor. Grace and Lily wore white dresses and carried bouquets of wildflowers. Rebecca walked down the aisle alone, strong and whole, and when she reached James at the altar, he was crying. "I thought I was beyond second chances," he whispered as they stood before the judge. "We all get second chances," she whispered back. "We just have to be brave enough to take them." They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises of love and protection and partnership. When James said, "I do," Grace and Lily cheered so loudly half the guests started laughing. And when the judge said, "I now pronounce you husband and wife," James kissed Rebecca with his whole heart, while his daughters, their daughters, tackled them both in the biggest hug the world had ever seen. 14 years later, Grace Sullivan stood at the podium of Stanford University's graduation ceremony and looked out at the crowd. She was 21 now, graduating summa cum laude with a degree in social work. Her novel, The Guardian, had been published to critical acclaim, telling the story of a lonely man and two lost girls who saved each other. In the front row sat her family, Rebecca and James, their hair showing threads of silver now, holding hands like newlyweds. Lily, 18 and beautiful, beaming with pride. Sarah and Patricia, who had become honorary aunts over the years. Grace cleared her throat and began her valedictorian speech. 14 years ago, my sister and I were homeless, alone, afraid. We had nothing. We were nothing. And then a man we didn't know stopped to help us. She found James's eyes in the crowd. He didn't have to. He could have called the authorities and walked away. But he chose to stay. He chose to care. He chose to fight for us when no one else would. Her voice grew stronger. That choice changed everything. It gave me back my mother. It gave me a home. It gave me hope. And it taught me the most important lesson I'll ever learn. She paused, let the words settle. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who stays, who fights for you, even when it costs them everything. Today, I graduate with honors from one of the best universities in the world. Tomorrow, I start a job at the Sullivan Family Foundation, continuing the work that saved my life. And every day after that, I will remember where I came from. I will remember the parking garage, the fear, the cold, and I will remember the moment when a stranger became my father simply by choosing to love us. She looked at her family again, at the life they had built together from broken pieces. So to anyone listening who feels lost, who feels alone, who thinks their story is already written, it's not. Every day is a chance to choose differently, to help someone, to be brave, to build something beautiful from the wreckage. My father taught me that, and I will spend the rest of my life teaching it to others. When she stepped down from the podium, James was waiting. He pulled her into a fierce hug, and she was 7 years old again, small and scared and asking a stranger to save her sister. "I'm so proud of you," he whispered. "I learned from the best," she whispered back. That evening, the family gathered at the beach house for a celebration, the house that had sheltered them through storms, literal and metaphorical, the house where they had become a family. As the sun set over the Pacific, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, James stood on the deck with his wife and daughters and thought about the journey that had brought them here. He thought about the lonely man he had been, the empty success, the hollow achievement, and he thought about what he had become. Husband, father, protector, a man who measured wealth not in dollars but in love. Grace came to stand beside him, put her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly, "for stopping that night, for not walking away." "Thank you for asking me to help," James replied, "for being brave enough to trust a stranger. You were never a stranger, even that first night I knew." She looked up at him. "I knew you were supposed to be our dad." Lily joined them, then Rebecca, the four of them standing together as the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky. A family forged not by blood, but by choice, by courage, by the simple radical act of showing up when it mattered most. And somewhere in the universe, in whatever place the dead go to watch the living, Michael Sullivan smiled down at his son and whispered the words he had said so long ago. "Help when you can, son. That's what makes a man worth anything." James had finally learned the lesson, and in learning it, he had found everything he never knew he was looking for. Home, purpose, love, family, the things that actually matter, the things worth fighting for, the things that make the second chances we're given worth taking. The end.